If anyone had told me I'd be the kind of girl who falls in love with a woman, and not just any woman, but someone almost twice my age, I would have laughed in their face and told them to stop watching so much indie Netflix. But all of that changed the first day I saw her. Dr. Viviana Moretti, our new literature professor. She walked in 5 minutes late that Monday morning, her heels clicking like a metronome against the tile floor, and the entire room fell into some kind of hush. The kind you hear in cathedrals when a stained glass door swings open. She was... God, where do I even start? Long legs wrapped in fitted high-waist black slacks that clung to her hips like they knew they were lucky. A cream silk blouse tucked in just right, sheer enough to tease, but structured enough to scream authority. And those stilettos. Black, glossy, pointed like they could shatter glass if she stepped the wrong way. Her lips, sharp red. Her eyes, icy green with flecks of amber, hidden behind sleek, rectangular glasses that only made her look more lethal. And her hair, rich espresso brown, thick and long, tied back in a low, flawless twist that still managed to look casually undone. Like she didn't try. Like she didn't need to. My heart? Already gone. I found myself checking her out. Like actually checking her out. Halfway through class, unable to focus on anything but the smooth curve of her throat as she tilted her head, the click of her pen against the desk, the way she arched one eyebrow when some guy 2 rows ahead gave a dumb answer. She was a walking contradiction. Soft and sharp, warm and cold, out of reach, and yet, God, I wanted her to reach. I remember I was staring, really staring, and suddenly my mind spiraled. She was whispering something into my ear, her lips barely grazing the shell of it. I imagined her fingers against the back of my neck, her breath warm, her voice dropping an octave. Is this what you wanted, Tess? My thighs pressed together without me meaning to, and that's when I dropped my pen. Loud, metallic, echoing. Everyone turned, including her. She looked right at me. "Excuse me?" she said, her tone cool and razor-sharp, laced with a touch of amusement. I blinked, heat crawling up the back of my neck. Sorry, I, just dropped something." She held my gaze a second too long. Then she nodded once, slowly, and turned back to the board like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. Not to the pulse in my throat. Not to the way I had to physically force myself to look away from the lines of her back in that silk blouse. I'd never been physically attracted to anyone like this before. After the pen incident, I became unwell. Not in a fever hallucination way, worse. I started trying. I printed the syllabus. I started reading ahead. I bought color-coded sticky notes and a brand new copy of Pride and Prejudice, just to look prepared. And I picked a new seat. Second row, center left. Optimal eye line. Close enough to catch her perfume, far enough to pretend I wasn't doing all of this for her. Dr. Viviana Moretti. Every morning she walked in, it was like something out of a European fashion commercial. Her long legs slicing through the room, heels whispering across tile. Always in trousers that hugged her hips like they'd been stitched to her body. Always in silk blouses that shifted with every breath. She'd toss her hair back once, just once, and the whole class would pretend not to stare. But I didn't pretend. I watched her, every blink, every frown, every time she licked the corner of her lip while rereading a sentence. And worse, I tried to impress her. I became that girl, the hand raiser, the overthinker, the one who asked questions. Like that Thursday, when we were deep into Of Mice and Men, everyone was quiet, just listening, taking notes. I raised my hand. Dr. Moretti didn't hide her sigh. "Yes, Miss Tess?" I cleared my throat. "So, when Lenny kills Curly's wife, is it because he's secretly, like, A feminist? The silence was immediate. Even the air stopped moving. Dr. Moretti blinked, removed her glasses, folded them delicately. Then, with the patience of a predator, she looked directly at me and said, "Miss, please, sit down before someone thinks you're serious." The room exploded. Choked laughter, a full-body wheeze from the back. A girl 2 rows over whispered, "Damn," like it physically hurt. And me, I sat, red-faced, heart pounding, but also triumphant. She heard me. She saw me. She burned me. And I loved it. Which is why I started doing the next stupid thing. Perfume. Not on me, on my papers. I'd read somewhere that sandalwood triggers emotional memory and arousal. Something about how it lingers in the olfactory system and makes people associate the scent with intimacy. So I bought a bottle, imported, $86, which for a college student is practically self-harm. And before every assignment, I'd lay my printed paper out and gently, reverently, mist the top corner. Just once. Let it dry, then slide it into her tray like nothing was different. First time, no reaction. Second time, still nothing. But the third time, she handed it back to me without a word. No eye contact, no acknowledgement. But when I flipped to the front page, there it was, in neat red ink at the top right corner. "I don't like the scent of sandalwood, miss." 8 words. 1 note. My whole body reacted. She actually knew the scent of sandalwood? I wasn't invisible. I wasn't annoying. She noticed. And for me, that was the first real touch. Something changed after that. Not a lot. Just the air. We'd lock eyes sometimes. Random, split-second moments in class. I'd glance up and find her already looking, like I'd summoned her without meaning to. And then, just as quickly, she'd look away. No smile, no nod, nothing she could be accused of. But it was enough to make my stomach flip. It wasn't just me anymore. I knew it wasn't. The way her mouth would tighten after our eyes met, the way she stopped calling on me in class but still paused every time I shifted in my seat. She was noticing me now, which made the obsession worse, which made me worse. I was riding that subtle high until the night everything cracked wide open. It was a Friday. My roommate had dragged me out to some grimy, off-campus bar with sticky floors and too many LED lights. I had a fake ID that said I was 24 and from Michigan. Don't ask. I was halfway through sipping a rum and coke I didn't even like when I turned toward the bar and froze. Dr. Viviana Moretti, in jeans. Black, high-waisted, fitted like a sin. She wore a charcoal sweater tucked in, ankle boots, and no glasses. Her hair was down, soft, glossy waves grazing her shoulders. She looked younger, or maybe just looser. Like a woman, not a professor. I stared like a fool. Then, drunk on cheap rum and bad decisions, I smiled and waved. "Hey, Dr. Moretti!" She turned, saw me, and to my shock, smiled. Not that polite in-class curve, a real one, small, but real. "Tess," she said, walking a little closer. "How are you doing?" I held up my drink like an idiot. "I'm living the dream, Professor." She raised an eyebrow, then nodded toward the glass in my hand. And you're sure you're old enough to have that, sweetie?" I felt a knot in my throat, but managed to hold a smirk. "Maybe not, but I'm legal for so many other things." That made her laugh, a soft, surprised sound like she didn't mean to let it out. "How old are you really?" she asked, tone curious but calm. 20, I said, sipping. "Almost 21, but I won't tell if you don't." She gave me a look, one part amused, one part warning. "Well," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear, "as Flattering as this is, Tess, I'd really prefer if you stuck to submitting clean sheets of paper, and maybe ease up on the intense gazing during lectures. My cheeks flushed. Heat bloomed across my chest. I nodded, a little embarrassed, but I didn't back down. I can try, I said, but it's kinda hard not to look at you. She sighed, smiling again, like she was both flattered and deeply tired. And then, because I clearly hadn't maxed out my cringe quota for the week, I leaned in just enough to ask, "Are you seeing anyone?" She blinked. Her mouth opened like she might answer, but then her phone rang. She picked up. And suddenly, her entire expression changed. Her brow furrowed, lips pressed together. "What? No. That can't be. Are you sure?" A pause. "Okay. I'm coming now." Then, without another word, turned and walked fast, almost running, toward the exit. Gone. Just like that. And I was left standing there, drink sweating in my hand, heartbeat pounding in my throat, wondering what the hell had just happened. The next few weeks were strange. Dr. Moretti wasn't herself. She still wore her stilettos and silk blouses, still carried that worn leather satchel like it had lived through a dozen lives. But the electricity was gone. The air around her had dulled. She stopped pausing between sentences to let us breathe. She stopped asking questions that challenged us. Sometimes, she barely even looked at us, her voice droning through notes like she was somewhere else entirely. And it broke my heart. Some days, she left class 10 minutes early with a mumbled, "Read the rest on your own." Some days, she'd trail off mid-thought and stare at her desk like she'd forgotten where she was. I wanted to ask if she was okay. But what do you say to a woman who barely lets you in when she is okay? I tried writing emails, tried over and over. "Dr. Moretti, I notice you've been... Hey, I just wanted to say if you ever... Is everything all right? I know I'm probably the last person. Delete, delete, delete. Too cringe, too much, too obvious." So I did something dumber. Of course I did. I started sending her flowers. Every other day, I'd leave them at the English department office, with her name on the card and a note, always signed, "You know who." I never gave my name. I didn't need to. The notes weren't grand gestures, just quiet things I hoped would land somewhere soft. "I hope today's lighter than yesterday. You looked tired this morning. Try tea and sleep. Not everyone who sees you wants something. Some of us just see you." I always chose lilies, white ones. Clean, subtle, not too romantic, just thoughtful. But nothing changed. Not in her face, not in her voice. And after 2 weeks, I started to think, maybe she knew. Maybe she was ignoring it on purpose. The news had started dropping tornado warnings again, as expected. It had become routine. Every first week of the month, sirens, alerts, then anticlimactic drizzle. We had stopped taking it seriously. We joked about it. "Tornado Tuesday," someone called it. So that day, when Dr. Moretti walked into class looking even more agitated than usual, I didn't expect it to be different, until I saw what she was holding. A full bouquet of white lilies, crumpled slightly at the edges from being carried in too tightly. My brain stalled. I froze, mid-breath. She was carrying my flowers, the same ones I'd left on her desk every other day for 2 weeks. And then, right there, in front of all 30 of us, she walked to the metal trash bin at the front of the lecture hall and dumped them in. All of them. Gone. My heart cracked like brittle glass. "I've told you," she began, voice tight. "Whoever you are..." Her eyes flicked across the room, then landed on me. "To quit sending me flowers, or notes, or spraying your assignments with perfume. Enough of it." The room had gone utterly silent. You could hear someone's pencil roll across a desk. "Enough of your childish staring! Enough of whatever this is!" Every word was a slap. I blinked hard, willing the tears back, but I could already feel the sting behind my eyes. "And for the record," she added, exhaling sharply, "I'm not interested." Then, just as suddenly, she paused. Her shoulders dropped. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple and closed her eyes for a beat. When she opened them again, her voice was calmer, lower. "I'm sorry," she said. "That was a lot, coming from me. Let's begin, class." And just like that, she turned to the board and started lecturing on Virginia Woolf, as if she hadn't just broken me into 1,000 silent pieces. After class, I didn't move. Not right away. I watched everyone pack up and shuffle out, some glancing at me, some pretending I didn't exist. My skin buzzed, my throat thick with shame, but more than anything, I felt grief. Not for rejection, but for the version of her I thought I knew. It wasn't fair. What I'd done had been weird, maybe, cringe. But it came from somewhere honest, somewhere warm. Didn't she see that? When I finally stood and walked out into the dim hallway, most of the building had emptied. The late winter air was sharp through the windows, quiet. And then, I saw her. Dr. Moretti, walking quickly down the long hallway, papers hugged to her chest. I didn't think, I just moved. "Dr. Moretti!" I called, breath catching. She slowed, turned, her face unreadable. "Tess," she said flatly, "shouldn't you be somewhere else right now?" I hesitated. "I just wanted to talk." She folded her arms. "About what?" I stepped closer. "I didn't mean to upset you. The flowers, they weren't meant to be weird. You didn't look okay. And I didn't know how else to—" "Tess," she interrupted softly, almost tired. "You're 20. You're my student. This is grossly inappropriate." "I'm not asking for anything," I said quickly. "Not a relationship, not some scandal. I notice things about you, and you don't seem okay." She looked at me then, really looked. And in her eyes, for a brief, quiet moment, I saw it. The grief, the exhaustion, the isolation. "You think you know what noticing means," she said, "but you don't. You're not supposed to carry me." "Maybe not," I said, voice shaking, "but I still wanted to." A pause. She blinked once. A muscle twitched in her jaw. And then? A distant sound, screeching sirens splitting the quiet. The lights in the hallway flickered once, then again. An automated voice crackled through the building speakers. "Tornado warning in effect. Please proceed to the designated shelter zones immediately." We both stood frozen. Viviana sighed. Of course, it would be today. "You know where the nearest shelter is?" I asked, already hearing doors shutting and feet hurrying downstairs. She nodded once. "Library basement." "Come on," I said, gently touching her arm. She didn't move away. And together we walked down the corridor, past the windows now rattling in the wind, into a stairwell lit by flickering emergency lights. Toward the basement. Toward the silence. Toward the storm. The basement of the library felt like a place time had forgotten. Concrete walls, harsh overhead bulb, dust motes turning in lazy spirals through the air like they didn't know a storm was howling above us. The shelves were tall, metallic, half empty, filled with crumbling hardcovers, brittle catalog folders, and rows of things nobody had touched in years. The door thudded shut behind us with a heavy, echoing clunk. The sirens outside muffled to a distant scream, but the wind was louder now, throaty, violent. It made the ground groan sometimes, and I swear the windows at the top of the stairwell rattled in fear. Dr. Moretti walked ahead of me, her heels slightly softer now on the basement's bare floor. She didn't look back to see if I was following. She didn't need to. She made a straight path toward the furthest corner of the basement and stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. still perfectly dressed, a maroon blouse tucked into tailored black trousers, but the stormlight made her skin look paler than usual, almost hollowed out. I lingered by one of the central shelves, close enough to feel her presence, far enough to respect the invisible line she clearly didn't want crossed. We said nothing at first. The silence wasn't peaceful, it pulsed, like something alive in the walls. Every time the wind surged, I flinched. It hit the building in angry, guttural bursts, shaking the doors at the top of the stairwell like it was trying to claw its way inside. "You all right?" she asked softly, still not looking at me. "Yeah," I lied. I stood, hugging my own arms, heart beating too fast. The flickering light above us cast shifting shadows over the floor. She moved, finally, quietly, toward a low shelf against the wall. Her fingers trailed along the dusty spines of old books, her movements slow, like they grounded her somehow. Then she crouched. And for a strange second, she didn't look like Dr. Moretti, the poised, sharp-edged woman in stilettos who could crush you with one eyebrow raise. She just looked human, a woman in a storm, flipping through books to keep her hands from trembling. She pulled one out gently, a navy blue hardcover. The title faded and cracked across the spine. She flipped through the yellowed pages and smiled to herself, just barely. "Island of the Blue Dolphins," she murmured. I looked up. "What's it about?" She glanced at me, surprised by the question, or maybe surprised I hadn't read it. "It's about a girl," she said slowly. "Left alone on an island after her tribe flees, she survives there, for years, builds her own shelter, hunts, defends herself, talks to the sea, waits." "Alone?" "Yes, completely." She stared at the page for a long moment before adding, "It was the first book I read properly, cover to cover. I was 8. She didn't say it like a brag, more like a confession. I watched her thumb a dog-eared page and settle into a crouch. She seemed smaller like that, softer. She chuckled suddenly, a low, almost fond sound, and said, "You weren't even in contemplation then." I blinked. "What?" She looked up at me, smile crooked. "When I read this, you didn't exist, you weren't even a concept." Her voice was light, but it landed heavier than she meant it to. I squinted at her. "Okay, what are you, like 34? That's not that deep." She laughed. A real laugh this time, surprising both of us. "I'm 38. The words hung in the air. I stared at her. "Wait, seriously?" She nodded, standing now, brushing dust from her slacks. "And I have a daughter." A pause. "She's 18. I said nothing. The space between us stretched and twisted. 18. My mouth went dry. "Oh," I said, because that was all I could manage. Dr. Moretti set the book back down and leaned against the wall again, her gaze drifting upward like she couldn't bear to see my face after that. But I was still looking, still searching her features for something, a crack, a flicker, anything. The storm raged louder now, shaking something metal outside. She closed her eyes briefly and exhaled. I tried to think of something clever to say, some flirty line to cut the tension, but suddenly it felt wrong. Not because I didn't still want her, but because now, for the first time, she felt real. And real things don't always smile back. She stood near the wall, arms folded, gaze somewhere far away. I sat on the emergency blanket, knees drawn up, trying not to fidget or flinch every time the wind snarled outside. I couldn't stop hearing her voice. "I'm 38. I have an 18-year-old daughter." Every time I replayed it in my head, something inside me shifted again. Not rejection, not exactly, just this sobering pull, like someone was peeling back the fantasy I'd been clinging to, slowly and gently. I looked over at her. She wasn't cold or cruel, but she was distant. like she was trying to place miles between us without taking a single step. The bulb above us flickered again, harder this time. Then, without ceremony, it went out. Click. Dark. My breath caught. The only light left came from the narrow stairwell window, where flashes of white and gray from the storm briefly lit the room in pulses. "Don't panic," Viviana said calmly, her voice a little closer than I expected. I hadn't even noticed her moving. "I'm not panicking," I said too quickly. "You're breathing like you are." She crouched beside one of the shelves and pulled open a metal emergency box I hadn't noticed before. A flashlight clicked on, flooding her face in pale light. God, she looked beautiful like that. Harsh shadows beneath her cheekbones, hair falling forward over one eye. Calm, capable, untouchable. She handed me a small emergency lantern, then sat across from me on the blanket, still keeping distance, but not far enough to feel cold. "Thanks," I murmured, adjusting the glow. Outside, the wind howled again, this time louder, more violent. I curled into myself just slightly. "You really don't like storms," she observed, almost casually. "I'm not afraid," I lied. She didn't correct me, just watched me in that way she did, thoughtful, unreadable, like she was slowly translating me in her head. I tried to find something to fill the silence. "So," I said, "your daughter, is she in college?" Viviana nodded. "Freshman year, out of state." "Do you talk often?" "Not as much as I'd like," she said, her voice softening in a way I hadn't heard before. "She's at that stage where distance feels like freedom." I remember that. I smiled faintly. "You say that like you were ever 18. She chuckled. "Oh, I was. But I had her young, barely 20, just about your age. So most of my adulthood was multitasking." "That explains the maturity," I teased, and instantly hated how awkward it sounded out loud. But Viviana didn't roll her eyes, didn't sigh. She just looked at me for a long moment and then said, "You don't know what you're doing, do you?" The words hit like a soft slap, not cruel, but cutting. I blinked. "What?" "With me," she clarified. I looked down at my hands, heart climbing into my throat. "I don't know why or how," I murmured, the words escaping in a shaky breath, like I was afraid they might shatter if I tried to hold them back. "I just really, really like you." Viviana didn't respond right away. She simply watched me, her face unreadable, but her eyes impossibly soft. And God, that quiet stare undid me more than shouting ever could. "I love it when you tuck your hair behind your ear right before you get annoyed with someone," I said, voice trembling. "And when you wear those sleek black slacks, like you're about to conquer Rome through literature." Still, she said nothing, but her lips parted slightly, just enough for breath. "I love the way your voice changes when you read passages you love," I continued. "Like your chest rises a little slower, like the words are heavy on your tongue. And when you pace, when you turn your back to the class and mutter your thoughts out loud like we're not even there." I swallowed hard. "You make me want to pay attention to everything. And it's never been like that for me. Never." Something shifted in her then. I couldn't name it, but it passed behind her eyes like a flicker of heat catching wind. Slowly, so slowly, she moved across the blanket until she was beside me. Her knee almost brushed mine. My whole body went still, like I'd been wired into the floor. She reached for my hand. "Tess," she said softly, "you are an extraordinary young woman. Spontaneous, warm, a little maddening, but beautiful in that way that makes people ache just a little." She squeezed my hand. "But no matter how much either of us feels," I caught it. That word. "Wait," I said, eyes narrowing. "You said either." "What?" she asked, blinking. "You said either of us. You didn't say you don't feel anything. You said either." She started to pull her hand away, but I held it tighter. If I weren't your student, I pressed, or you weren't older with this huge gap between us, would things have been different? She pulled back fully now. Her hand slipped from mine. She leaned away like she was putting air between a match and gasoline. When I was 20, she said after a long pause, I thought I knew everything. I had a plan, a mind, a map, and still I fell for a guy in college who completely unraveled me. I got pregnant, tried to love him for 5 years. I still regret meeting him to this day. She laughed once, dry, bitter. I didn't laugh. That wasn't what I had asked. I reached for her again and took her hand back. That's not what I asked. She didn't resist, but she didn't look at me either. My voice was soft. Do you find me attractive too? The silence was heavy. Outside, a rumble of thunder rolled low across the sky like a warning, but neither of us flinched. Viviana turned her head slowly. Her eyes locked onto mine, and she didn't blink. Then, wordlessly, she reached out with one hand and touched my face, just the edge of it, the curve of my cheek. She used the tip of her thumb to trace a slow, delicate line along my cheekbone, and I let out a quiet whimper without meaning to. She didn't stop. Her fingers brushed lower, toward my jaw, and finally to my lips, hovering, almost reverent. You have, she whispered, her voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. Very soft, very dangerous lips. She swallowed like she was fighting her own body. And I lied earlier, she murmured. I don't hate sandalwood. I can't stand it because it drives me crazy. You'd spray your papers and I'd sit at my desk gripping the arms of my chair. I gasped softly, heat rushing to my neck. And those flowers you sent? She added, shaking her head, eyes glassy. How the hell did you know my favorite flower was white lilies? That was all I needed. I leaned in, slowly, until our foreheads nearly touched. My lips brushed hers, just barely. Please kiss me, I whispered, breathless. I want to know what you feel like so badly it hurts. Viviana hesitated. Her hand slid gently under the hem of my shirt, her thumb trailing a line of fire across my waist. She leaned in until her breath warmed my face, and then, finally, our lips met. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, careful, painfully slow. Like she needed to remember what kissing was after years of forgetting. Her hand cupped the back of my head, the other sliding to my hip as she pressed into me, her sigh spilling between my lips as our kiss deepened. My body melted into hers, like it knew this was where it had been trying to get to all along. She pulled me toward her gently but fully until our bodies curved into one another on the blanket. Her mouth moved to my neck, breath hot against my skin. Then she brought her thumb to the edge of my shirt, and then, gently, deliberately, traced it, just at the place my shirt clung the most, and I forgot how to breathe. I gasped softly, blinking hard as I held the blanket tightly for balance. I want you, I said breathlessly. You're making me want things I haven't wanted in so long, she whispered, dragging her lips across my collarbone. And then she stopped. I can't do this, she said quietly. Not like this. She pulled back, breath unsteady, lips still parted, hands hovering in the space where our bodies had just met. And just like that, everything inside me unraveled. The tears came fast, messy, not delicate or poetic, just a flood, sharp and sudden. I turned my face, but she already saw. My voice cracked. I'll drop out. Tess, I'll change universities. I swear to God, if that's what it takes to be with you, I'll do it. Her face fell. No, no, sweetheart, you can't. I can, I choked. I will. Just don't push me away. I've never felt this way about anyone before. I don't care about the rules. I don't care what people think. I just want to stay near you, love you. That's it. Viviana reached out, gently placing her hands on my shoulders. Her touch was light, like she was afraid too much pressure might break me in half. Tess, she said softly, shaking her head. You have your whole life ahead of you. This is just a phase. No, it's not, I cried. Stop saying that like I'm just confused or bored or experimenting. I know what this is. She closed her eyes for a moment, composing herself. You're 20. You think you know everything. I know how I feel, I said, voice trembling. I'm not asking you to risk your job. I'm not asking you to commit to anything right now. I'm just asking you to let me love you. Or at least not throw it back in my face like it's something to be ashamed of. Viviana looked like she was holding her breath. Then she let go of my shoulders and sat back on her heels. Relationships are messy, Tess. They're not just soft kisses and stolen glances and perfume on essays. They're hard, ugly sometimes. I just ended one a few weeks ago. 3 years. Gone. And at first it was butterflies. Yes. But by the end it was just exhaustion. Silence. Distance. I stared at her. Tears still sliding down my cheeks. Not knowing how to hold her words without letting them pierce me. I wouldn't forgive myself, she continued, if I let this go further than it already has. You're still figuring out your life. You deserve to do that without me complicating it. I lunged forward and wrapped my arms around her, tightly, like I needed her body to anchor me to the earth. Like letting go meant losing something I couldn't replace. She stiffened for a moment, but then her arms circled around me. Please don't say it's wrong to love you, I whispered into her shoulder. It doesn't feel wrong. It feels like the only thing that's ever made any damn sense to me. She didn't reply. Do you know how old the president of France is compared to his wife? I pulled back just slightly, meeting her eyes. He's 46, she's 71. That's a 25-year age gap. Viviana blinked. Tess, Macron married his teacher, Viviana, literally. And people made noise for a while. But now, they're happy. She's proud of him. He chose her. And they didn't care what anyone thought. She looked down. I reached for her hand again, gently this time. We're not wrong. Not really. She didn't speak right away, just looked at our hands. Her thumb brushed the back of mine. Then she whispered, I just can't. I swallowed. Why? Because right now it doesn't feel right. Not yet. Not like this. I thought that was it. The end. That she would tell me to forget her. That I'd ruined everything. But then, her voice softened. You know what? She said. Let's see where we are in 5 years. I looked up, startled. What? She gave me a small, crooked smile. It didn't reach her eyes, but it felt honest. Honest and tired and maybe, somewhere deep down, hopeful. If in 5 years, she said, we're still in contact, and you still feel the same way about me, and I haven't moved to another continent, then maybe we'll try. For real. I blinked through the years. Really? Really. And for the first time in what felt like hours, I exhaled. Not because the ache was gone, but because I could finally hold something in my hands, even if it was just a maybe. Looking back now, it almost feels like a challenge she gave me. Not a cruel one, not a test, just a pause. 5 years. If I could love her steadily, if I could wait for it to be right, not just urgent, then maybe we'd get the chance to try. And so I waited. I lived, I healed, I worked hard. I'm 25 now. A therapist. Can you believe it? Full circle. The girl who once sobbed on the floor of a library basement for love now gets paid to help people hold their own hearts together. And no, Dr. Viviana Moretti didn't move to another continent. Thank God. She stayed. Maybe she was waiting too. Quietly, cautiously, holding that space between us like a fragile thing she didn't want to drop too soon. The first flirty message came on a random Tuesday. 5 years almost to the day. Are you still stubborn? And from there, it began. Our real beginning. No storm, no secrets. Just two women who finally knew what they wanted, and who they wanted it with. We dated. We learned each other again, gently this time, slowly. No rushing, no hiding. She let me in. Let me see her. Not just the professor, not just the fantasy, Viviana. And it was the most beautiful, wholesome experience I've ever had. Last year, at Christmas, I invited her and her daughter to my tiny apartment. We had paper snowflakes taped to the windows, and wine that was too sweet. And Viviana kept laughing at how bad I was at keeping them roast warm. And that's when I did it. Right there, in front of our little tree, I pulled out a small velvet box and asked her to marry me. She cried. Then she said yes. Of course she said yes. Now we live in a cozy townhouse with books stacked in every corner and white lilies growing in mismatched pots outside our kitchen window. We share coffee, arguments about punctuation, mornings that start slow, evenings that end with her asleep on my chest mid-chapter. And yes, her daughter is 2 years younger than me. But she's brilliant, kind, protective in a way that makes me laugh. We're a family. A strange one. An unlikely one. But real. And we couldn't have a more beautiful, happier family than this.
If you enjoyed this story and want more, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who would love it, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, make sure you're subscribed with post notifications turned on so you never miss an upload. Till next time, bye.